Hey, you come here often? What, you think my room is messy? I'll clean it tonight, I swear. But there is something even messier than my room here. Do you know what that is? That's right, the depths of my heart and my Steam library filled with unplayed games. Whoo-wee, that's a lot of Steam games to clean up. I guess you can call this a Steam cleaning. That name's already used, I can't use that. Anyways, I've been trying to clear up these unplayed games piling up in my library, basically rotting. But there's also a surprising amount of hidden gems in between the pile of trash that is the Steam catalog. Though to be fair, I do usually pick games that are rated very positive at the very least, or games whose trailers sold me instantly. Doing Battlecats videos all the time on my channel is fine, but I also enjoy doing other games in this channel. I'm also just a big fan of showcasing lesser known games to others in general, like how I did with Robbie Reeby. There's still some people that have told me previously in the past that they've played Robbie Reeby because of me, because I just wouldn't shut up about it, and that made me feel like, I don't know, proud? Whatever that feeling is, I like it. Bring me more of that. There's a lot of games in general that I want to showcase, but for today, I'll just limit it to 3. These 3 are Everslash, Olija, and Kunai. Olija, I don't know. I've heard some other reviewers say Olija. I don't know. I'm just gonna say Olija, okay? These 3 are all 2D platformer games with a focus on weapon-assisted movement. Everslash has a sight that allows you to dash around. Olija has a harpoon that you can teleport into, and you wouldn't believe which weapon Kunai is focused on. Your Kunais allows you to stick around and hang into walls. You can find all of these games on the Steam, they'll also be linked in the description. If you're interested in any of them, be sure to give them a spin or put them on wishlist. Also, I'll try to not give out too much spoilers. In this video, I don't think I talked about anything that is really spoiler worthy, but in the future, if there are spoilers, I'll definitely give a warning beforehand. So let's not waste any more time and just get right into the first game that I want to showcase. This is Everslash. In Everslash, you play as Mari, a young reporter visiting her sister, Sewon, who's a researcher in a brain simulation laboratory. Mari wants to go around and interview people for fun articles that she can write up, or at least that's what she said to her sister. But it's actually just an excuse to spend time with her sister more because she rarely comes home, which is pretty cute. But as she talked with the scientists in the lab, she learned about how there have been weird incidents lately. Dangerous monsters have been sighted, and some staff has just been randomly disappearing and came back with no memory of what happened. Sewon has been the one that's been dealing with all of these incidents, but the other scientists instead are convinced that Sewon is the one who's behind all this, that she's doing some kind of crazy mad scientist experiments behind their back. Mari was understandably upset to hear the accusations being shown to her beloved sister and threatened them to use her journalistic power to do the scariest thing imaginable, canceling them on Twitter. Mari decided to venture deeper into the lab by herself in order to learn about the truth, but not before picking up a site developed specifically to deal with the monsters running amok. The site not only is effective against the monsters, but it also allows her to dash around towards the direction of her attack. So now with her newfound weapon, Mari's little adventure deeper into the lab begins. In any 2D platformers in general, dashing just feels like a universally loved mechanic. Like seriously, who doesn't love unlocking a dash option? It always feels so good to have in any platformers in general. So having a game whose central mechanic is to dash as a means of also attacking is just really nice. You can slash your sight in 8 different directions, and slashing it not only propels you towards the direction, but also damages any enemies that you pass. So the combat is really simple. You just slash through the enemies and yeah, that's it. Enemies don't do contact damage unless they're actively attacking, so you need to find the right timing to slash through them. And if you slash through your enemies repeatedly, you will deal more damage per combo. So timing your offensive is key, and dealing as much damage as possible feels really satisfying. And of course, your sight is the key movement option for the entire game. Your sight essentially allows you to fly indefinitely. You do have a stamina gauge that limits your slash, but your stamina recharges pretty fast. If you use your slashes just right, you can pretty much just never touch the ground. Not even modern Kirby can do that anymore. You do lose your stamina more if you bump into a wall, so you do gotta be a bit careful on where you're slashing. The game pretty much expects you to abuse this mechanic though. A lot of the quote-unquote platforming are more to how well can you maneuver your flight. There will be spikes in the floor, there will be spikes on the ceiling, there will be moving spikes everywhere, and you'd have to cross the room preserving your stamina while also trying to defeat enemies and dodge lasers. There's quite a lot happening at once, yeah, but you'll get used to it, don't worry. If you want to get a high damaging combo on an enemy, you'd also have to be wary on your stamina gauge and not get too greedy on stamina consumption. And of course, there are boss fights in the game as well. The boss fights actually quite varies from one another, which is pretty neat, demanding you to dodge around until you get an opening to do your combo slashes. And man, it's so satisfying when you know you delivered the maximum amount of damage in one cycle. But again, trying to be greedy with your combos might lead you with no stamina and could lead you to falling to spikes. The boss fights are actually pretty tough, I'll give it to them. Most bosses took me a couple of tries to beat, but it's nothing I can't handle. Each boss fights are generally pretty short too, so it doesn't feel frustrating when you have to restart. Though sometimes the bounce effect that you get from getting damaged is a bit janky, but I can give it a pass. And it's hard to get mad at the game when the boss fight music is really good. This is amazing! It feels like a music straight from Mega Man. I never actually played Mega Man before. Please don't phone me for this. I wonder who's the composer for this. Seems like most of the soundtrack, aside from the ending theme, is made by someone named Hyun. I tried looking it up, and sure enough, in the VGMDB website, there's a list of works from Hyun. There's Everslash in 2020, and in 2021, they seem to have made some songs for a visual novel called Flowers Blooming at the End of Summer. In 2022 and 2023, they composed some songs for rhythm games, I think. But what the heck is this? Hige Oyaji 2. What? I looked this up a bit, and the first thing is, I found out that Hige Oyaji seems to mean mustached man. And also, Hige Oyaji seems to be some kind of collaboration effort between a lot of different composers to remix Mario songs. Though, aside from one of the songs in the album, the music from the album doesn't seem to be freely uploaded anywhere though. So unfortunately, I didn't get to hear what Hyun's contribution, Zombie Mario, sounds like. Also, this album cover just looks really funny, like, who's this dapper dude dressing up as Mario? That's kinda dope. Speaking of people who worked on the game, well, this is an indie game, and the game also seems to be just independently developed by a developer named Jamin Park. I also looked into Jamin Park's work, and apparently Everslash is his only game ever. It does kind of explain the length of the game though. This game is really short. My first clear of the game was only 75 minutes long, just barely over an hour. There's even an achievement for beating the game in 30 minutes, which I also did. It's a good way to kill time while waiting for barons to recharge. Because this game is really short, the gameplay also doesn't really change that much. Mari doesn't learn new moves, get new power-ups or anything like that. For the most part, it's just the platforming sections being a bit different here and there. But it really isn't a problem at all because, well, it's a short game. It does not overstay its welcome in the slightest. You know, for a short game, this game has a really nice flow to it. In terms of like, you know, balancing both the gameplay and the story. It doesn't feel like the story gets too in the way of the flow of the gameplay, nor does the gameplay felt too long either. Granted, when I played the game, I didn't know that the game was this short. So when the game ended, I thought, there's no plot twist or anything? That's it? I mean, it feels like a climax, but I was expecting a plot twist. I guess I just thought that it was gonna be longer, so I set myself an expectation that there's more to it. But if I knew that this was a short game, I'd say the ending was just fine. Speaking of story, I think they also did a great job in putting a decent amount of personality and interactions in such a short amount of playtime. And all within these characters with very simplistic pixel art style too. It's quite amazing how they managed to balance both good gameplay and pretty neat story. So yeah, I think this game's really good. I'm very surprised by how almost nobody seemed to ever talk about this game. There's almost no review of this game on YouTube, and the game also has just very little downloads on Steam. I can pretty much count this as a hidden gem. If you're into quite a fun platforming adventure to burn an hour or two, this is a high recommendation from me. I'd love to see this game being recognized more. Granted, I can kinda understand that if you're not really into the price of the game and you might think that it's a bit too pricey or whatever, but it does go on sale pretty often, and when it goes on sale, it goes like very cheap. So if you're interested, at least wishlist it if it's not on sale yet. Though currently at the creation of this video, Steam Summer Sale is up, so you know. Anyways, let's just move on to the next game on the list. This is Olija. In Olija, you play as Faraday, a leader of a poor fishing village, sets on a desperate sail in the hope of getting a big catch for a big fortune. But during his sail, a whale attack and a storm caused the ship to be destroyed, causing him and the crew to be stranded and separated. Luckily, he later found himself getting picked up by the boatman, who lives in an island filled with other castaways. All of them are victims of the storm in the past, and they all can't seem to find a way home. The only potential way is a huge gate in a separate island, but this gate is locked behind 3 blue keys. Faraday then ventures with the boatman with the goal of finding his crew as well as finding the keys to bring the castaways back home. Along the way, Faraday discovers a harpoon, but he can sense that this isn't just any ordinary harpoon. The special legendary harpoon works under Faraday's command, as he can recall the harpoon at will back to his hand. Furthermore, if the harpoon hits a target, he's also able to teleport to the harpoon's location instantly. So now, with the legendary harpoon in hand, his journey to return home with his fellow crew and uncovering the secrets of the Land of the Storm begins. Olija is an immersive experience of beautiful world building and storytelling. The whole game just looks really impressive with such a limited pixel art style. To put it simply, this game is very atmospheric. Each areas are very beautifully crafted and there's many levels of care and detail being put into the surroundings. The caves with some light shining in between, the lush foggy area with waterfall, trees and flowers blooming, the dark mysterious underground with skeletons hanging around. They put a lot of effort into making sure the world feels alive, unlike the skeletons. Although the world building is great, admittedly I didn't get into the main characters that much. Faraday is a silent protagonist that doesn't show much emotions at all. And there's also the princess of the land, Princess Olija, that Faraday just so happened to save by chance, who's also kinda just a somewhat generic princess, at least I think so. Also, title drop, that's the name of the game. Ooh, the boatman is pretty cool though. He's a pretty serious guy for the most part. But if you blow this horn at the start of the map too much, he starts to get really angry at you and even starts to throw rocks at you. Yeah, I deserve that. Well, I guess the main characters didn't really have much chance to grow as the game is only about like 5 hours long, so the game probably couldn't really fit much dialogues or have much chance for the characters to grow, and the story is honestly a little bit confusing. I mean, maybe I'm just stupid, but I really don't get it that much. I don't know, I wasn't too into it. Legitimately, I can't really explain what the story is aside from what happened in the intro, but the world building is still the main strength of the game. There's a lot of NPCs that makes the game world feels complete. The scientist in town with the weird creations, there's weird traveling merchant that lets you gamble your money for random materials. Yeah, you can't escape gacha anywhere. And there's these old and withering slaves that you just see walking around in your path. They just fumble around, tries to grab something and falls over. And there's also the royal guards that did you spit on me? You got something to say, buddy? The music too is pretty neat. It really fits the vibe of the area you're in and it's of great quality. As for the gameplay itself, the combat is fairly simple. Aside from the harpoon, you're also equipped with some other secondary weapons that you find along the way, such as a rapier that helps with melee attacks and cutting ropes, a crossbow for a simple projectile weapon, and also a gun. You can also use your harpoon or rapier to bash enemies in melee range. After a certain amount of hits, you'll do a finisher that'll also deal damage to surrounding area. Crossbows and guns are pretty straightforward. You do damage from afar, that's about it. You also use up special ammunition for them, using arrows and gunpowders, which you'll usually find along your journey alongside other materials. Speaking of materials, you'll find plenty of them when you're exploring. Most of these materials are used to craft hats. You can give these materials to this funky hat dude that runs a shop in a town, and he'll give you some special gears. Hats are special gears that you can equip before entering a map. They'll give you a special effect until you finish exploring the map. Things like acid resistance, bonus damage, or even having sharp feathers that follows you when you teleport. My favorite one is this Croc's hat, which gives you lifesteal. Lifesteal is always good. Unfortunately, this Croc hat isn't really that fashionable. I look kinda silly. I also haven't really talked about how the map works, so you're presented with a big sea chart with some point of interest you can land on. You'll discover other maps and unlock other places as you progress, which lets you access certain points of interest and advance through the game. You can backtrack to take paths you miss, or if you forgot to explore something in the previous area, or just to collect more materials. But anyways, back to the combat. I also find the combat to also not be that great. Despite given multiple weapons of choices to use here, there's almost no reason to ever use the gun and the bow. You basically can kill off every enemies by just throwing the harpoons, teleporting to them, and bashing them. They get stunned when you bash them with your melee weapon, so you don't really need to worry about them retaliating. Plus the gun and the bow requires ammo, which in fairness are pretty plentiful, but look, I'm a petty hoarder, right? I'm saving all that up for the final boss. I'm not even joking, that's actually what I did. There's really not any actual incentives to ever use the range attacks. Even flying enemies can be taken down with the harpoon. And then there's also the boss battles, which are kinda okay? I'll be honest with you, most of the time I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing in the boss battles. Like, I kinda get the gist of it, but for the most part it's dodge attack, wait for an opening, throw harpoon, and you spam your melee attack. I wish I could use the harpoon mechanics more, but in the end I really only use it to bash the boss like every other generic enemies, and I pretty much never have died in a combat too. My only deaths in the game are from stupid things like falling off of a cliff and I thought it was the intended path. The harpoon mechanic is also just surprisingly very limited, since you can only teleport to the harpoon when it hits a target, so you can't just teleport anywhere you like. There are these stationary eye flower thingy that you can use as a target, but I swear I don't see a reason to use almost any of them in a fight ever. The puzzles are also kind of just meh. Most of them are just throw harpoon here, teleport there, congrats, you did it. Throw harpoon to hold down the switch, then you go through the door, then you retrieve the harpoon, congrats, you did it. It's pretty shallow. I didn't really feel satisfied finishing the puzzles. It all just kind of feels like tutorial. Once in a blue moon, they throw in some kind of cool mechanic, like this electricity puzzle that I thought was really cool. So you gotta charge your harpoon with an electric current to activate an electric box in the next room, but you can't bring your harpoon in the water or else you'll electrocute yourself. So you gotta leave the harpoon before crossing the water. That's pretty smart. And then they never used this mechanic ever again. Whenever they introduced an interesting mechanic, they used it once or twice and called it a day. They never got in depth with any of the puzzle or combat. It's a damn shame. There's so much potential in this game for the mechanics of Olija, but they never really make any interesting use of it. Oh yeah, when I was searching up about who works on the music, I saw an interview that kind of answered a decent amount of questions earlier actually. In July 2020, VG247 uploaded an article where they interviewed the main dev of Olija, Thomas Olson. Olson explained that he did most of the things himself, from the game development and even music. He mentioned that the soundtrack collaborator includes a local Japanese saxophonist, a shakuhachi player, I don't know what that is, and even his wife. But also, pretty much right at the start of the article, Olson stated that the game was not made with the harpoon right from the start. It was something I found in early research, and I think I had a bit too much fun with it, which kind of explains why the harpoon ends up not feeling like it gets as much usage as it should have. And he also mentions that the story was made up on the fly, it was improvised. And that bit of an interview also explained why the story was a little bit confusing to me. Though I'm still idiotic at understanding stories, so the game itself is still pretty enjoyable though. I find myself remembering some of the beautiful scenes in the game and some of the interesting NPCs interaction bits here and there. The world feels beautiful and is just grand. It's very polished from the visual design to the music and everything. If you're hoping for an action-packed, high-skilled combat 2D side-scroller, which was what I was hoping for, then I can't say I recommend it that much. It's not quite for me. But if you're looking for like an immersive experience with great care in the atmosphere, definitely give Olija a spin. Okay, well, let's just move on to the final game on the list before I start to ramble on too much. This is Kunai. The world is now run by robots with almost no humans inside. These robots are divided, with a faction plotting to wipe out humanity, led by a rogue AI named Lemonkiss. What? Stupid name, but the other faction, a rebellion faction planning to put a stop into Lemonkiss' plan. You play as TBY-1143, a tablet-headed robot developed in a lab that was activated by the rebels in hope of being their savior. The robot there calls you Tabby, and so wielding your newfound katana, as well as a pair of kunais that you can use to grapple into walls and ceiling, Tabby's journey to stop Lemonkiss' plans begins. So Kunai is a Metroidvania with an emphasis on, would you believe it, the kunais. Early into the game, you can only jump around and slash with your trusty katana, but you'll soon come across a pair of kunai with chains, one for your left hand and one for your right hand. Each of these kunais are bound to 2 different buttons, and pressing the button will shoot the kunai out from Tabby's hand, and it'll attempt to latch into any ceilings or walls nearby. And of course, this also allows you to swing around Spider-Man style. There's quite a decent amount of movements that you can utilize just from using the 2 kunais alone. The buttons are very responsive and it makes the kunai's usage all the more satisfying. It just feels so joyous to swing around while exploring. The game really makes you feel like Spider-Man, you know? Without the tragic canon eventing, god no. Well, I mean, I guess the world is in ruins, so who knows. Combat-wise, your main damage dealer is your trusty red katana. This katana attacks incredibly fast and you can basically spam your buttons to do rapid slices. There's no stamina bar or anything like that, so there's nothing stopping you from just spamming attack, which is handy because your katana can also deflect bullets. Holy moly, this deflectability is extremely satisfying. Your katana is also imbued with lifesteal powers. Every time you defeat an enemy, a portion of your health will be refilled, making it so that you have proper reasons to defeat most enemies you find along the way, instead of just bypassing them with your kunais. Killing enemies also gives you money, which you can use to upgrade yourself, your weapons, and also sharpening your katana. For example, you can get better lifesteal, regenerative health, or even making your katana able to do special charge attacks. This charge attack is busted. You can easily clear off enemies with this move. It's so satisfying. In fact, most of the things you can do here are busted, really. You'll also run across multiple other secondary weapons along the way. The shuriken that can stun annoying enemies, the machine gun that is basically jetpack joyride, and a weapon that has been described as to be able to move mountains. At first I thought this is gonna be like some ground-based attack or anything, but instead I get something better. With all of these powerful tools at your disposal, most common enemies you find while traveling are not a problem at all, but that's not really that much of a complaint, I think. Unleashing hell against common enemies here just feels so damn good. It's not that the game has no challenge though. Some enemies just can't be dealt with random weapons, maybe you need to beat it by deflecting their own attacks. And I still did die several times here and there, but most of them are from environmental spikes because I screwed up my platforming, and also during boss fights. Dying will simply take you back to your last checkpoint and you won't lose any progress or even your money. Plus, you would usually get a decent amount of speed with your kunai so that you can get back to where you died in a relatively short manner. Speaking of boss battles are generally pretty cool. They're usually placed not long after you get a new tool or learning new mechanics, which gives you a chance to try out the new things you just got or learned. Like for example, right as you obtained your kunai, you fight against a boss that would be right out of reach from your katana, but the boss would sometimes create big chunk of rock to attack you, so you can climb onto the rock with your kunai and then you can hit the boss with your katana. What is it with enemies using attacks that exposes their weakness? We could just chuck smaller rocks or something. The formula makes learning the new stuff more exciting and fun. I really like how they handled it, and the boss designs are also pretty cool. The boss battles in general are just joyous to do. But this game's charm doesn't just stop there. Not only that the gameplay is great, but the NPCs, areas, and soundtracks, they're all real quality. The writing in this game is pretty clever and not trying too hard to be funny either. NPCs are pretty humorous and it feels like they're just put right on the right places. Their dialogues are pretty well written, though I wish some NPCs would have different dialogues sometimes depending on where you are in the story. Some does, and some NPCs move about, like this particular NPC that'll comment on any new weapons you picked up. But for example, there's also this other NPC earlier in the game that's dying and explodes into bits afterwards. But if you leave and come back, he'll still be there, once again talking about how he's dying, and then he explodes. Again, you do you, buddy. Aside from that, the locations are pretty cool too though. There's like a dungeon area, an airship, the lush jungle, and crypto mine? Luckily, none of the enemies here tries to advertise you some get-rich-quick scheme. The other area that I remember fondly is the city. There's a lot of NPCs here that are just doing their own things, running their own stores, like this maid cafe that's and climbing the tall skyscraper just feels really good. Music is so damn good as well in here. This is probably one of my favorite area music. The designs of the NPCs, though they are pretty neat, they're funny robot man, but the one that has the most expression is Tabby himself. Look at him, he's so cute, especially when he crouches. You can also fashion Tabby with a bunch of hats you find along the way. And boy, this game has lots of them. There's secret chests being placed all over the place, and most of them you'll be getting hats from them. Hats do nothing except for fashion, which I guess does mean it does something. Though some chests will also contain a piece of heart container. Collect 4 pieces of heart to increase your maximum health by a little bit. So yes, even though it's a Metroidvania, exploring doesn't actually give you any secret abilities or secret tools or anything. Those are pretty much required to progress and it's laid out along your path, which is kind of one of my complaints, because well, this is a Metroidvania supposedly, but exploring doesn't feel that rewarding. Like, hats are cool and all for sure, but it's really not enough motivation for me to backtrack to previous areas. And the game isn't too difficult either, where heart containers are really that big of a deal. Exploring an area for the first time is still cool, I like it quite a lot, but returning to an area I've went through, maybe if we have a teleport between areas, I'd be a little bit more motivated. Also, yeah, there are no ways to teleport between areas. Yes, your kunai makes traveling faster, but man, some areas are still really lengthy, and some roads are just really long. Sometimes, for example, the ceiling is too low for you to swing around with your kunai, but Tabby's walking speed isn't that slow, so it usually isn't that much of a complaint even if I walk around. I don't really find myself enjoying the backtracking at all. Even discovering the cool hats here and there gets a bit old when you have to go through long hallways for multiple minutes. Weapon upgrades are purely store-bought, so you can't expect anything from exploring. There's almost no time where going back to a previous area with your newfound weapons and abilities unlocks any secret or any path. So backtracking ended up just kind of being like this, a little bit of a chore to finish certain room that you might have forgotten to explore in your first time visit. And so far there's only like 2 times where backtracking is cool for me personally. It was once when I found a place where you can fight gauntlets of enemies, which gives you a hat. And the other is the Church of Skebin. Basically, there's this obstacle course inside the Church of Skebin, and you gotta beat it under 25 seconds to earn a reward. This obstacle course is actually pretty freaking tough. It took me quite a while to beat it. You really gotta know your stuff and use everything you have to get through this. This is pretty tight, but clearing the gauntlet will give you... I like this hoodie. I'm now officially a part of the Skebin cult. But who's Skebin? There's no NPCs here that's named Skebin. There's no one in the credits of the game that's named Skebin. And I don't see any discussion or threads online asking or explaining about the origins of Skebin. So I had to do my own digging. And I managed to reach out towards Skebin himself. Skebin is a speedrunner who's been very supportive towards Kunai way before its release. When Kunai had a demo being showcased in Gamescom 2018, Skebin would come to the booth every day to improve his time on the time trial demo, and even made some fan arts of the game. He caught the attention of the Kunai devs and they started talking with each other. When the Kunai dev made a Discord server, he was given a special Skebin role, and eventually someone also joked about a Skebin channel. So a Skebin channel was made, where people would say Skebin. But then it sort of devolved into people basically worshipping Skebin and making up their own lore, and thus the Church of Skebin was made. Nowadays the channel is also used to show off their time records for the Church of Skebin trials, the obstacle course I mentioned earlier. Also, Skebin showed me some scrap concept arts that he had for Kunai, like the scrap shopkeeper, a ninja enemy, as well as a very early design of Tebi, which is completely different than the current one. And what's crazy is that this isn't the only rabbit hole I discovered. Another funny thing I discovered was that Kunai had a pretty odd release, at least in terms of rating. Not too long after release, Kunai had the game's rating review bombed on Metacritic, with the rating going down as far as 1.7 out of 10. What happened, you might ask? Who did this? Is it someone who had beef with the dev? Was there anything controversial in the game? Well, the identity of the perpetrator is one person with lots of throwaway emails, and they've got experience in previous review bombs too. One game they were particularly proud to review bomb was Insurgency Sandstorm. They even bragged about how and why they did it on Reddit. So why did they do it? Well, they explained in the Reddit post that the main reason they started review bombing games is because the character Casey from Pokemon anime does not appear in the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime. I'm serious, this is what they wrote down. How does that make any sense? Okay, well, realistically, I feel like this isn't an actual excuse and that they're just making this up. Maybe they're just doing it for fun and they wanted to spice the story up, you know, just to get a little bit more popular. But But still, what in the world did they just come across? Okay, we're getting way too sidetracked. Back to actually the game itself. What were we talking about again? Oh yeah, the whole Metroidvania aspect thing about how backtracking feels weird. I wish that the game is maybe designed to be more linear and isn't trying to be a Metroidvania, or at least have the teleport spots to move about easily. Going from one area to another is a big hassle and I don't really like it. And I think some of the upgrades shouldn't be all store-bought, maybe leave some to be discovered as well. Still, if you're not trying too hard to collect the hats you've missed or more heart containers, I'd say this game is actually really solid. As an adventure, this game is super fun and very well polished. I highly recommend this game. I also highly recommend to still explore any area on your first visit, as you can still discover neat things here and there. But I can't recommend trying to find secrets in previous areas too much. If you're just going from start to finish, I think this game is an absolute joy to play. Combat, boss fight, movement, dialogues, the style, they're all very charming. If you're looking for a platformer that isn't too long with an emphasis on fun movement, I highly recommend giving Kunai a shot. So yeah, that's 3 games. That's 3 video games off of the list on my Steam library that I can finally check off. I said as I add more games to my library in Steam Summer Sale. God damn, this is a never-ending cycle. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed or discovered new great games from this video. The Steam link for these games are in the description, and if you've experienced any of the game mentioned, whether it's beforehand or after you watch my video, or maybe you're just interested in any of the game, just tell me your experiences or your thoughts in the comment. I have a lot more games that I want to make videos of. I want to say, hey, you should recommend me games, but honestly there's already a decent amount of games in my queue. But recommend me anyways. And yeah, I think that's all that I want to talk about. I'm probably gonna turn this into a series. I feel like I've said the same thing on my inscription video, but that I didn't like how that one turned out. Speaking dramatically, I think it's just not for me. This one though, I kinda like how this one turned out. I guess I just put way more effort into this one, despite knowing that it kinda definitely will not do as well as my Battle Cat stream highlights, but it's fine. I don't care about the views. No, I do care about the views, actually, I do care. But that's more the reason to put more care into this video, right? Does that make sense? Am I stupid? Am I crazy? Well, I was crazy once. Speaking of stream highlights, I didn't actually stream any of the games that I reviewed, so no, you didn't miss any streams. And you know, stream highlight VOD is on the description. I think the gaming experience is very different when you stream a game or not stream a game. Like when I stream Hacknet, I was not really enjoying the time I had when I streamed it, honestly. But when I decided to continue the game off stream, I really enjoyed Hacknet and got into it quite a lot. I even bought the DLC, Hacknet Labyrinth. I'm probably gonna play more games off stream much more from now on. Not that I'm stopping to stream games, of course I'm still gonna stream, just, you know, not every game that I play. And also speaking of Hacknet, that's probably gonna be my next game that I'm gonna review. Either that or like Last Command. So yeah, if you like this video or you're just more interested in this kind of stuff or interested in Hacknet, then look forward to it. Hey, if you enjoyed the vid, like, subscribe, comment, follow, cheers, upvote, dude, favorite, super react or whatever. And you know, if you're still listening to me here, just comment, wow, good video, smiley face, this changed my life. Yeah. Also shoutouts to Nitro Rat. I'm pretty sure my video format is heavily affected by him.